I didn't realize how much of my life I was missing by waking up late. I thought more sleep meant more strength. I thought rest meant staying in bed until the day came to find me, but something inside me whispered that the morning held something sacred, something the noise of the day could never give me. And so, 1 week ago, I made a decision, a small one, but one that would change everything. I chose to wake up before the world did. Not just to rise early, but to rise with purpose, to sit quietly in the presence of God, to meet the morning, not with my phone in my hand, but with my heart open to heaven. That first morning, it wasn't easy. My bed was warm. My body was tired. And the world was still silent. But as I stood at the edge of that stillness, I realized it wasn't empty, it was full. Full of peace. Full of presence. Full of clarity I'd been chasing in the noise. I sat down, closed my eyes, and whispered just one word, here. That's all I could say. I didn't come with a list. I didn't bring a plan. I just showed up. And in that quiet hour, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt aligned. The first thing that changes when you begin your day with God is not your circumstances. It's your center. The storm might still rage. The bills might still be due. The people around you might still be difficult. But something in you becomes still. Something in you becomes rooted. And when you're rooted, the winds don't shake you the same way. You don't bend to every emotion, every opinion, every distraction. You begin to stand differently, not in pride, but in peace. In that stillness, I learned that peace doesn't come from everything going right. It comes from giving the first part of your day to the one who holds all things together. That morning hour became my anchor. I didn't scroll. I didn't rush. I didn't check emails or chase problems. I just breathed. I opened the Word. I listened. And in the quiet, I began to see, not with my eyes, but with my spirit. The kind of vision that reminds you who you are before the world tries to tell you what you're not. The beautiful thing about waking up early to pray is that it reorders your priorities. When you start the day in communion with God, you're no longer reacting to life, you're responding with direction. You're not driven by noise, you're led by truth. And that direction carries through your decisions, your conversations, your thoughts. It lifts your mind to a higher plane. It teaches you that discipline is not punishment, it is protection. It protects your spirit from being drowned by distraction. That first day I found clarity. The second day I found strength. The third day I found a kind of joy I had been searching for in 1,000 other places. And every day after, I found something new waiting in that still place. Not every morning was a mountaintop moment. Some were quiet. Some felt dry. But even then, just the act of showing up reminded me that I was not alone. And that kind of faithfulness, that kind of habit, it doesn't just change your week. It changes your life. There's something humbling about being awake before the sun, something powerful about speaking before the world speaks to you. Because when you meet God in the morning, you don't carry the day alone. You walk with assurance. You walk with grace. You walk with a choir that cannot be shaken by the headlines, the gossip, the uncertainty of the hours ahead. You carry light into the darkness. And when others ask why you're not panicking, why you're not overwhelmed, why your eyes look different, you'll know. You'll know it's not because life got easier, it's because your soul got stronger. And if someone were to ask me what changed in just 1 week, what single habit began the transformation, I would tell them it was this: waking up before the world, seeking heaven before I sought the headlines, putting my soul in order before my schedule. It may seem small, it may sound simple, but that one habit became the doorway to everything else. And I don't plan to close it, not now, not ever. Because when you give God your mornings, He guides your moments. The second habit that changed my life in 1 week wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't cost money or require special tools. It was simple, almost too simple to believe it could make a difference, but it did. I started writing down my intentions instead of my problems. And friend, that small decision reshaped the atmosphere of my heart and the direction of my days. For a long time, I thought journaling was a place to unload all the weight I carried. I filled pages with every burden, every frustration, every unanswered prayer. I wrote until the pen ran dry, hoping that somehow pouring out my pain would lighten the load. And while there is power in being honest, I realized I had built a habit of rehearsing my struggles more than declaring my purpose. I had unknowingly trained my mind to circle around what was wrong, rather than align with what could be made right. So one morning, I made a different choice. When I opened my notebook, I didn't list what was hurting. I didn't recount what went wrong yesterday. I wrote what I intended to do today. I wrote who I intended to be. I didn't ask life to get easier. I asked God to make me stronger. And instead of journaling my worries, I recorded my faith. I wrote, today I choose to be focused. Today I speak gently. Today I follow peace. It wasn't about pretending the pain didn't exist. It was about deciding that it wouldn't lead. Each line became a seed, and seeds, when planted in faith, grow roots. I didn't always feel different right away, but I noticed how I carried myself changed. I wasn't waking up defeated. I was waking up determined. The language I used in that quiet time began to echo in my thoughts throughout the day. I wasn't just reacting, I was remembering who I said I'd be. I wasn't stuck in survival mode, I was walking in intentionality. You see, the mind is like fertile soil. Whatever you plant it will grow, whether it's weeds or wheat. For too long I had been planting fear, planting doubt, planting regret. No wonder my days felt heavy. No wonder I walked in discouragement. But when I began to plant purpose, everything shifted. I wasn't just writing what I hoped to feel. I was choosing how I would live, even when the feelings hadn't caught up yet. And oh, the peace that came when I stopped reliving the past and started declaring the future. I realized that God doesn't just dwell in our pain, He moves in our purpose. And when I aligned my words with His promises, I wasn't just writing goals, I was making room for grace to grow. The pen became a tool of faith, a silent declaration that said, I may not see it yet, but I believe it's coming. Some days I didn't know what to write. I sat there staring at the page, tempted to fall back into old habits, to write what went wrong, to complain, to blame. But the Spirit reminded me, speak life. So I wrote, even if the words were simple. Today I will smile. Today I will listen. Today I will serve. And as small as it seemed, it recentered me. When you write down your intentions, you give yourself a map. You don't wander through the day hoping to feel inspired. You walk with direction. Even if distractions come and you know where to return. You've set the compass. And that compass always points back to who God is calling you to be. There is something holy about writing your life before the world tries to write it for you. Before opinions flood your feed. Before the stress of the job pulls you in 100 directions. Before anxiety tells you you're not enough, you sit down, you breathe, you write. Not what the world says, but what the Spirit whispers. You write what you're called to, not what you fear. You declare what you're building, not what you've lost. And in doing so, you stop reacting to life, you begin shaping it. I look back at those pages now not as a record of perfection, but as proof of progress. I see where I stumbled, where I got back up, where I grew. And I'm reminded the pen that writes intention is guided by a hand much stronger than mine. It's not about having the perfect plan, it's about having a willing heart. A heart that says, I want to live this day on purpose. A heart that refuses to drift. A heart that knows every day is a gift and every intention is a step toward the life God already sees for you. So if you feel stuck, if you feel like each day is blending into the next with no meaning, try this. Don't write what broke you, write what builds you. Don't just express your fear, declare your faith. And as you write, remember this, you are not just documenting a moment, you are aligning your mind with heaven's blueprint. Write your life like you believe God still has a plan for it. The third habit that changed my life in just 1 week may seem small to some, but it carried a weight of discipline that reshaped my spirit. I began drinking water before I touched my phone. That's it. No grand declaration, no long list of rules. Just a single intentional act each morning to nourish what God created in me before inviting the noise of the world in. You see, we live in a time where the first thing we reach for when we open our eyes is a screen. Before we've even taken a breath to thank God for waking us up, our hearts are already tangled in headlines, texts, emails, and endless scrolling. We're consuming information before we've even consulted our Creator. And what we allow in those first few minutes often shapes the spirit we carry into the rest of the day. But on that first morning when I left the phone untouched and simply reached for a glass of water, I didn't just hydrate my body, I honored the temple God gave me. I said, with my action today, I will take care of what you've entrusted to me. That sip of water became a symbol, a moment of care, a quiet decision to begin the day slowly, deliberately, with reverence. And as I sat there sipping that water in silence, I realized how often I had allowed myself to be rushed into distraction, how I had let urgency rob me of clarity. But in that still moment, I remembered who I was and whose I was, not by a notification, not by a calendar alert, but by being present, just present, with the breath in my lungs and the Spirit of God near. The phone used to be the gatekeeper of my mornings. It told me what to worry about. It told me who was waiting on me. It filled my heart with urgency before it had a chance to fill with peace. But that week, when I began choosing water over Wi-Fi, something shifted. I began the day from a place of stewardship instead of stress. And that one small choice carried into how I showed up in every other area of my life. There's wisdom in learning to delay gratification, in telling yourself no, not out of punishment, but out of purpose. Because when you teach your flesh to wait, you allow your spirit to lead. And every morning I chose water over distraction. I wasn't just making a healthy choice, I was training my heart to listen for God before listening to the world, to quiet the noise before it began. That water didn't just quench my thirst. It reminded me to pause, to remember that this body, this life, this breath, it's all a gift, and I must tend to it gently. If we're not careful, we will scroll our way into anxiety and comparison before we've even spoken one word to heaven. We will rush into the day dehydrated spiritually, emotionally, and physically because we forgot to care for the vessel God is using. Each time I honored this small habit, I felt a renewed strength rise in me. Not because of the water itself, but because of the principle. It wasn't about rejecting technology, it was about reordering my priorities. Before I opened myself to the opinions of others, I opened myself to gratitude. Before I consumed the chaos, I consumed what brings life. And in doing so, I created space for peace to enter before pressure had a chance to take hold. What I learned in that week is this: the first 5 minutes of your morning are sacred. And how you spend them is a reflection of what you truly value. If you begin the day checking who needs you, you'll spend the rest of the day trying to prove your worth. But if you begin by nurturing the temple of the Holy Spirit, by acknowledging your breath, your body, and your Creator, you'll walk with a quiet confidence the world can't shake. It wasn't always easy. Some mornings I was tempted to pick up the phone just for a moment, just to check. But that still small voice would whisper, feed the soul first. And so I did. I drank my water. I sat in silence. I looked outside at the sunrise. I thanked God for one more day. And in that simplicity, I found strength. It's amazing how something so small can make such a big impact, but that's how God works. It's not always the thunder. Sometimes it's the whisper. Not always the fire. Sometimes it's just a cup of water. And in that cup, I found a new rhythm. A rhythm that reminded me to slow down, to be present, to start with what matters. And I tell you now with certainty, if you want to change your life, you don't need to start with something big. Start with something pure. Start with something true. Start by honoring the day before the world ever gets a chance to interrupt it. Because when you nourish your soul before your screen, you won't just survive the day, you'll rise through it. There's a quiet kind of power that most people overlook. It doesn't shout. It doesn't compete. It doesn't need the last word or the loudest voice. This power is wrapped in patience, wrapped in humility. I found it when I started practicing the habit of listening more than I spoke. Now that might sound simple, even too simple to make a difference in your life. But don't underestimate what happens when you stop rushing to respond and start learning to receive. Because the moment I began to truly listen, really listen, not just with my ears, but with my spirit, something changed inside me. I didn't just become a better communicator, I became a better human being. Before that shift, I didn't realize how much of my talking came from a place of insecurity. I felt like I had to prove something. I had to be understood, had to be right, had to explain myself. I wanted people to know where I stood, what I meant, what I believed. But in trying so hard to be heard, I had forgotten how to hear. I had forgotten the value of silence, the kind of silence that leans in instead of pushing out. But then one morning during that week of intentional habits, I felt it in my heart, stop talking so much. Let others speak. Let God speak. Let the moment breathe. And so I did. I bit my tongue when I wanted to jump in. I paused when I felt the urge to correct. I waited and I listened. And what I heard began to teach me more than I ever expected. I started noticing things, details I had missed before. Pain hiding behind someone's words. Fear dressed up as anger. Questions that didn't need answers, only understanding. When I stopped preparing my next sentence and started truly being present, I heard things that couldn't be said out loud. I saw souls that were tired. I saw people who weren't looking for advice. They were just longing for someone to sit beside their pain and not fix it, but feel it. And slowly I learned that listening is one of the most sacred forms of love. When you listen, you say without saying you matter. Your story matters. Your voice is safe here. And something holy happens in that kind of space. Walls come down, hearts open up. Healing begins. Not because of what you said, but because of what you didn't have to say. In conversations, I found myself less defensive, less focused on being right, more focused on being kind. I didn't need to be the authority in the room. I didn't need to control the narrative. I just needed to show up with an open heart and an uncluttered spirit. And you know what happened? I didn't lose influence, I gained it. People trusted me more, not because I spoke more, but because I understood more. That's the mystery of it. The more I listened, the more I was entrusted with, not just information, but intimacy. People opened their lives, not because I had answers, but because I had time. Because I gave them space to speak without interruption. Because I wasn't rushing to interject with a solution, but waiting patiently to connect with their soul. And it wasn't just people I started listening to, it was God. When I quieted my own voice, I could finally hear His. Not always in dramatic ways. Sometimes it was just a nudge, a still, small voice guiding me in the moment. A whisper that said, slow down, wait, be gentle. And those whispers, they carried more weight than any advice I could offer. They reminded me that wisdom is not always loud, it's often still. You see, talking feels like control. But listening, real listening, requires surrender. It means setting aside your pride. It means making room for another person's perspective, even if you don't agree with it. It means allowing space for God to work in the silence. And that takes strength. It takes discipline, but the fruit it produces, peace, understanding, healing, is worth it. So often we think we need to say more to be effective. But sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay quiet and be fully present. Not with judgment, not with impatience, but with grace. During that week, I found that my relationships changed. My heart softened, my pace slowed, and I saw people really saw them. I saw the image of God in them. I saw the wounds they carried, the courage it took just to show up each day. And I knew then that the habit of listening wasn't just good for me, it was necessary. It was holy. Because when you choose to listen, you invite the Spirit to move. You step out of the way. You stop trying to fill the space and you let God speak into it. And friend, when He speaks, even the silence becomes sacred. And so I learned the loudest voice doesn't always carry the truth. Sometimes it's the quietest soul in the room who holds the answer. But you'll only know that if you learn to listen. The fifth habit that changed my life in 1 week was one I had overlooked for years, not because I didn't know it mattered, but because I didn't realize how powerful it truly was. I began ending each day with gratitude, not occasionally, not when I felt like it, but intentionally every single night. Before my eyes closed, before my thoughts drifted away, I would whisper a simple, quiet thank you. Now I didn't wait for everything to be perfect to do it. I didn't wait for a breakthrough, a promotion, or some grand blessing to fall into my lap. I gave thanks for what I already had. A roof over my head, the breath in my lungs, the people I love, the peace I didn't earn but received anyway. I gave thanks for the strength that got me through the day, even if that day was difficult, especially if it was difficult. You see, gratitude has a way of healing what complaining never will. It doesn't erase the pain, but it shifts the posture of your heart. It reminds you that even in the dark, there's still light. Even in the struggle, there's still grace. And when I started ending each day with gratitude, I noticed something remarkable. My sleep became more peaceful, my heart more anchored, and my perspective far less anxious. There was a time when I used to lie in bed replaying every wrong thing that had happened, every regret, every conversation I could have handled better, every fear about tomorrow. I thought if I kept turning it over in my mind, I could fix it. But all it ever did was steal my rest and leave me feeling weary when the next morning came. That's what worry does. It drains you before tomorrow even begins. But when I began closing my eyes with thanksgiving, the night felt different. I didn't have to understand everything. I didn't have to have all the answers. I just had to trust that God had been faithful once again, even if the day didn't look how I planned. And I would say, thank you, Lord, for keeping me, for carrying me, for never leaving me. It didn't take long before that simple habit became sacred. Gratitude is not weakness, it is strength. Because it takes strength to find goodness when life gives you grief. It takes courage to give thanks when you feel empty. But that's the beauty of it. Gratitude fills you. Not with more stuff, not with easy answers, but with awareness. And when you become aware of what you still have, the enemy loses one of his greatest weapons, discontent. This world is full of noise telling you that what you have isn't enough, that you need more, do more, be more. But gratitude stops all that noise. It says right here, right now, I have enough. I am enough. Because God is enough. And that realization doesn't just soothe your soul, it awakens it. I remember one night in particular. It had been a hard day. Nothing seemed to go right. I was tired, frustrated, ready to just crawl under the covers and forget the whole thing. But something in me said, give thanks anyway. And I did. I thanked God for the lessons in the discomfort, for the patience that was stretched, for the fact that even though I felt low, He was still close. And tears rolled down my cheeks, not from pain, but from peace. Because even in the middle of the mess, I knew I wasn't alone. That's the power of gratitude. It doesn't ignore the storm. It anchors you through it. It says, this day may not have gone my way, but God was with me every step. And when you end the day with that truth on your lips, it doesn't matter what happened hours before. Your spirit finds rest. Your soul finds security. Some nights I would list things 5, 10, sometimes 20. Little things. The smile of a stranger, a warm meal, a song that brought back a good memory. And other nights I could only muster one thank you. Just one. But even that one carried power. Because thankfulness isn't measured by how much you say, it's measured by how deeply you mean it. And here's what I discovered. When you learn to thank God in the small things, you prepare your heart for the greater things. When you're faithful in gratitude, you stay open to joy. And joy doesn't come from what's happening around you. It comes from what's alive within you. So I kept giving thanks every night, no matter what the day looked like, no matter what news came, no matter who walked away or what plans fell apart. I ended my day in worship, not worry, in praise, not pressure. And that one habit, that quiet moment of surrender, recentered my life. I don't know what your days have been like lately. Maybe they've been heavy. Maybe you've been searching for something to hold on to. Can I encourage you, try this tonight before you close your eyes? Say thank you, not because everything is perfect, but because God is present. Because you're still here, because mercy met you again. And when you do, peace will find its way in. Not the peace the world gives, but the kind that only heaven can send. The sixth and final habit that changed my life in just 1 week was learning to sit in silence, not to wait for something to happen, not to hear a voice or chase a revelation, just to be still, to be quiet, and to allow my soul to breathe. We live in a world that rewards noise. We are surrounded by constant stimulation, notifications, conversations, opinions, demands, and most of us, without even realizing it, have become uncomfortable with silence. We fill every moment with distraction because we're afraid of what we might feel if things got too quiet. But I'll tell you the truth, I discovered some of the greatest answers you're searching for will not come through talking or striving. They come when you finally grow silent enough to hear. That week I made a decision. Every day I would take at least 10 minutes and do nothing but sit with God in silence. No music, no phone, no agenda, no list of prayer requests, just stillness. And at first it was hard. My thoughts wandered. My hands twitched, wanting to check something. My mind started reminding me of everything I had to do. But I stayed with it. I breathed deeply. I reminded my soul, this is where strength is found, not in rushing, not in striving, but in resting. And then something beautiful began to happen. In the quiet, I began to feel the presence of peace. Not the kind the world gives, the kind the world can't understand. A peace that doesn't explain itself but wraps around you like a blanket. A peace that says you don't have to figure everything out. You just have to be here. I learned something else in that silence. God speaks the loudest when we are the quietest. Not always in words, sometimes in impressions, sometimes in conviction, sometimes in comfort. But it's in the stillness that our hearts become tender enough to hear what heaven is saying. When I stripped away the noise, I realized how cluttered my soul had become with distractions I thought were important. But in silence, the unnecessary begins to fall away. And what's left is something sacred, just you and your Creator, nothing in between. Those moments changed the way I carried myself through the day. When I faced tension, I remembered the stillness. When I felt overwhelmed, I paused before reacting. When I felt anxious, I knew where to go. I had already learned how to return to that place of peace. Silence became my sanctuary, not a punishment, not an emptiness, a sacred pause in the middle of a busy life. And let me tell you something, when you learn how to be quiet, you gain power. The power to listen before you speak. The power to respond instead of react. The power to wait from noise that doesn't serve your spirit. Some people mistake silence for weakness, but it's not weakness, it's wisdom. It's restraint. It's discernment. It's the voice that says, not everything deserves my attention. Not everything deserves a response. That week taught me that silence is not just a physical practice, it's a spiritual discipline. It reminds you that you don't have to carry everything. That you can let God be God and you can just be His. That you don't have to rush to be productive in order to feel valuable. Because value was already placed on you long before you performed a single task. I found freedom in that silence. Freedom from the pressure to always have something to say. Freedom from the lie that my worth is measured by my output. Freedom from the constant noise that told me I wasn't enough. Because in the quiet, I heard something truer than any of that. I heard, you are mine. I am with you. I am enough for you. And if you've been running, if you've been exhausted, if you've been praying but still feel stuck, I urge you, don't run harder. Don't speak louder. Sit. Be still. And listen. Let the silence strip you down to what's real. Let it heal you. Let it ground you. 1 week? That's all it took. 1 week of silence, and I found something I had been searching for in all the noise. I found the stillness of God's presence, and that changed everything. Because sometimes the most powerful breakthrough doesn't come in a shout, it comes in a whisper. And you'll only hear it when you stop long enough to listen.